The Afghan President Ashraf Ghani, who is attending the first ever major international anti-corruption conference here in London, has told the BBC that the illegal drug habit of the West is the main driver of corruption in his country. Earlier this week, the British Prime Minister David Cameron, who is hosting these talks, described both Afghanistan and Nigeria as fantastically corrupt in remarks that were caught on camera. Well, for his part, Nigeria's President Buhari has told the summit that corruption is a cancer that undermines the fabric of all societies. Let's take you to central London now, where I'm joined by Dr. Amy Jaraseme, who is the CEO of Lagos Deep Offshore Logistics Base. She's taking part in today's anti-corruption summit. Good to have you with us, Amy. Hearing from David Cameron earlier this week that Nigeria is fantastically corrupt, we of course all want to know if it is still or if things are improving.
I think Prime Minister Cameron's remarks reflect the perception that Nigerians face across the world. The important thing is that the Prime Minister and our President Muhammadu Buhari are both here tackling corruption. So corruption is definitely less now than it was prior to President Buhari taking charge, but we still have a lot of work to do.
You still see, Amy, every day corruption in your daily life and your business life?
The biggest area in which corruption affects a company like LADOL, and LADOL is in the private sector. We've built privately the largest industrial free zone in the country, and we have fought an uphill battle against corruption for the past decade. The biggest issue that we see is international companies coming into Nigeria and still choosing to contract with illegitimate or rent-seeking companies as opposed to working with legitimate companies in the private sector. And of course, this is one of the drivers of corruption, and it's one of the ways in which money illicitly leaves the country.
So what's President Buhari doing to tackle that?
Well, President Buhari has done a lot. We've seen in the local market, he's commended LADOL. He's trying to promote private companies that operate with due process, that operate with good corporate governance in Nigeria. What we need in Nigeria is more support from David Cameron in cracking down on international companies, more support from Secretary Kerry, who's also here, on cracking down on US companies, particularly in the oil and gas sector, that still contract with illegitimate companies in Nigeria.
What does it do in terms of the spirit of business, though, in Nigeria, when every day there are just little acts, perhaps, that people have to take part in, like giving someone a bribe? What does that do to the sort of spirit of business and entrepreneurship?
I mentioned that LADOL has fought an uphill battle for the past decade. It's enormously difficult, particularly because companies like LADOL are still in the minority. It means that you have to rely on following due process, and you have to be prepared to take your time and, in some cases, use the rule of law to enforce your rights as a legitimate company, because it is easier in some cases to get a waiver, and it is easier to try and get around the law. At least it was prior to Buhari coming to government. However, now we have seen a change in the way our government is dealing with us. We've seen a change in the way due process is being followed and law is being enforced, and companies aren't being given waivers, and they have to do more work locally. So we've already seen tremendous change take place on the ground, but of course the work has just started.
And is that going to be encouraging for young people in your country who perhaps before might have thought, look, I'm going to abandon Nigeria and work somewhere else? It's just not worth it.
The elections last year were very successful, and that encouraged young people to stay. When you fight corruption, it creates a win-win-win. The international companies win because the cost of doing business goes down. The local legitimate companies win because we have more capacity developed and more investment. And the young people win because it creates jobs across the country. It enables them to live healthy, productive lives in Nigeria. That lessens the migrant crisis, and it boosts the global economy. So fighting corruption is a win-win-win for everybody.
Dr. Amy Jaraseme, really good to see you. Thanks for joining us from Central.